The application of the multiple choice item in educational assessment. Efficiency, cost-effective technology, industrial testing productivity, high-quality standardized tests. No wonder it's been around for 100 years. The multiple choice item is now endemic in educational testing and assessment. It offers cheap scoring, quick turnaround of results, and excellent measurement properties. It will be with us in the next century as well as this.
The multiple choice item first appeared on the educational scene in 1914. It was the invention of Frederick Kelly, who at that time was working in Kansas. He designed the multiple choice item as part of his doctoral dissertation, really to fulfill two purposes. The first one was to overcome what he saw as a problem, which was the subjectivity of the teacher in grading student work. Here we're talking about primarily the written examination. The multiple choice item was meant to overcome this. The second purpose was to produce an item type that could be very quickly and easily scored. We were living in a time when efficiency was really, really important. And in the rapidly developing educational system of the West, it was absolutely essential that we had item types that were cost efficient and effective. And within 20 years, the multiple choice item was absolutely everywhere. During the First World War, it was tested in 1.75 million tests given to recruits joining the United States Army. And the people who developed those tests talked about mental engineering. Just listen to this quotation, which is taken from Joachim and Yerkes, writing in 1920 from page 185, in which they describe the effectiveness of their multiple choice tests in these First World War assessments.
The work of the Committee on the Psychological Examination of Recruits was another of the notable mental engineering achievements of the war. Its original purpose was to help to eliminate from the Army, at the earliest possible moment, those recruits whose defective intelligence would make them a menace to the military organization. But the military value of an early and reliable estimate of the general intelligence of each recruit proved enormously greater than had been anticipated in the enormous task of building up an efficient Army organization. It proved important to discover at the earliest opportunity those recruits who could learn the new duties that were required of them as soldiers in the shortest time.
From that quotation you can see that it's not only efficiency, but it's actually the claim that they are testing something that is important to make the kinds of decisions that they needed to make about where recruits were going to be placed, which jobs they were going to do. After all, there was a war to be fought. In the UK, Lloyd George was trying to make the production of munitions so much more efficient, because it was realised that efficiency was going to win the Great War, even more so than military strategy. The same had to be true of testing and assessment. And after the war, this efficiency spread to the whole of educational assessment. It's not surprising, therefore, that the multiple choice item is still so popular. It's popular because of this efficiency, if not because of the ease of writing the questions. And now we create guidelines for the production of multiple choice items to try and make sure that we get items that are efficient within the test in which they're placed, and so that they're producing the maximum amount of variance in order to contribute to test information and reliability. What kind of advice is this? Well, first of all, the stem of the multiple choice item shouldn't contain all the necessary information to select the key, but it shouldn't contain anything that is superfluous. So just that information which is important. The next thing about the STEM is that it should contain only vocabulary that is known to the test taker, unless, of course, it is testing vocabulary. However, the principle here is that the STEM should be well within the comprehension of the test taker. Moving on from there, we also have to be careful that we don't give any clues in the STEM as to the correct answer, such as using words from the key in the STEM, or, for example, writing distractors that are not grammatically consistent with the STEM. So there shouldn't be any clues there which lead to getting the correct answer for reasons other than what it is we wish to be testing. Now, the next thing is that each multiple choice item should test one and only one ability. So if it is a vocabulary item, for example, it shouldn't also test grammar, and so on. The principle has always been that each item tests only one ability or one construct. And if it tests more, then there could be multiple reasons for getting that item correct or incorrect, and therefore we can't draw appropriate conclusions or inferences about the ability of the test taker from the response to that item. Next, the key to any item should not give a clue about the key to any other item. Now, of course, this often happens in reading tests in particular, where multiple items are based on the same text. And it is the case, it's sometimes the case, that if we then get one item correct, then the response to another item is automatically pre-selected. The principle here is that each item should be stochastically independent from each other item. In other words, there is no dependency there. We should ensure that the key can't be selected without reading the STEM. And if it's a reading item, which is attached to other textual material, or a listening item which is attached to a listening text, then the test taker shouldn't get the item correct without having to read or to listen to that input material. This often happens when items can be answered just on the basis of background knowledge. We should avoid writing trick items. These usually include items which have ambiguous content, or they have too much information, or sometimes where there isn't enough difference between the distractors. And cases, this is often the case when we have more than one possible correct answer, but one answer is perhaps slightly more correct than another. And this is because trick items may distract some students, but others could get the item correct by using test-taking strategies. And we want to avoid, if at all possible, the likelihood of students being able to select the correct answer just by test-taking strategies, by studying the ways in which people write multiple choice items. We should avoid using negatives such as not and except whenever we can. And the reason for this, and especially double negatives, and the reason for this is that these kind of questions increase the cognitive processing needed and make the item more difficult than is necessary. For the same reason, we also avoid writing options that use phrases like all of the above or none of the above, because that involves having to look at multiple options and to weigh whether combinations of them are likely to be correct or false. Again, it overloads short-term memory and cognitive processing and is likely to start testing things other than what we want the item to measure. We have to make sure that only one option can reasonably be keyed. That is, there is actually only one correct answer. This is problematic because often particularly in language tests, it's possible to imagine lots of contexts in which some of the options could in fact be correct. And especially for test takers from different cultural backgrounds, they may come to the item with very different assumptions to those that the item writer has. We should also randomize the location of the key. Research shows, surprisingly, that if we don't, the item writers will most often put the correct answer as option C. And if in doubt, test takers are told, select option C. Another way of avoiding that kind of test-taking strategy is to make sure that all options are similar in structure and, most importantly, in length. If all else fails, students will either select C or they will select the longest option available, because the longest option is normally the correct one because it takes more words to get the correct answer in the option, in the key. And last but not least, we should avoid using qualifiers, always and never in particular, because they are less likely to be in a key than qualifiers like sometimes or probably, because it's less often that things happen always or never than sometimes. So those kinds of qualifiers should be avoided if at all possible. Now, once items have been produced, it's important that they are reviewed. Items normally go through a quality assurance process, and this normally has 4 stages.
Stage 1. Review of the test content.
Content review ensures that the item content matches the test specifications, so that topic and targeted ability are well represented in each item. This is often called item spec congruence.
Stage 2. Checking the item key.
We ensure the keyed answer is correct, and that distractors are not likely to be correct under any imaginable circumstances.
Stage 3. Conduct a bias and sensitivity review.
Is an item likely to result in lower or higher scores for an identifiable subgroup of the test-taking population? Is an item likely to upset or cause offense to any such group, thus contaminating the test score meaning?
Stage 4. Conduct an editorial review.
Check each item to ensure that there are no spelling mistakes, faulty grammar, or other errors that may make it difficult to process or understand the item.
Once items have gone through these reviews and we think they're okay, they are then piloted, ideally using a sample drawn from the population of test takers for whom the test is ultimately going to be used, so that we can look at the psychometric properties of the test, the statistical properties of the items, so that we can maximize item variance. And given the length of the test and the number of items that we can put in the test, to make sure that it is going to meet the required reliability that we need for this particular testing purpose. As you can see, constructing multiple choice items and building multiple choice tests is actually much more complex and involved than most people think it is. It takes a lot of work and a lot of research to build and construct multiple choice forms that actually work in the way we intend.
Multiple choice items remain the bedrock of standardized testing. Over 100 years of researching this technology will keep them in our educational tests for another 100 years and beyond.